The muddy waters of the Colorado River thundered with a fury unknown that April morning. Between the swirling currents and the churning foam, something small and golden struggled desperately against death. A puma cub, barely 2 months old, its blue eyes still shining with the innocence of youth, was being swept helplessly toward the jagged rocks of the canyon from the bank. The cries of a mother puma shattered the stillness of the Sonoran Desert. Sitlali, that was the name the locals had given her, ran back and forth along the river's edge, her paws carving deep lines into the mud, her roars echoing like thunder through the valley. She could see her cub, Eatsel, vanish beneath the waves, then surface again, only to be pulled further away. Each second tore a deeper wound inside her. Pumas were not meant for water. They were built for cliffs and shadows, for silence and precision, not for rivers like this. The current was far too strong. Sitlali knew that if she leapt in, the river would take her too. And yet, every fiber of her body screamed to do exactly that. She crouched at the edge, claws gripping the earth, eyes blazing with helpless terror. The roar that burst from her throat was unlike anything the desert had heard, not a call of power, but of pain. Then, from the brush behind her, a rust-colored figure emerged. Canelo, a stray dog with a coat like copper in the sunlight, had been watching from a distance. Months ago, his owners had abandoned him during a family trip. He had waited for days, starving and confused, before accepting the cruel truth. No one was coming back. Since then, he had survived by scavenging, by learning the rhythm of this brutal land, always keeping clear of the great predators, especially the pumas. But that morning, something about the sound of Sitlali's roar pierced through every instinct of fear he had ever known. It was not a roar of warning or dominance. It was a mother's scream, one he recognized deep in his heart. That he followed her gaze and saw the cub, small and golden, spinning helplessly in the water. And in that instant, something inside him awoke, something older than the divide between species. His mind went silent. His heart shouted one word: save. Canelo bolted forward. The world blurred around him as he plunged into the river. The cold hit him like a wall of knives. The current snatched at his legs, dragged him under, slammed him against hidden rocks. But he kicked back with every ounce of strength left in his lean, scarred body. His paws sliced through the water, his tail steering him with the memory of wolves long gone. From the shore, Sitlali watched, frozen in disbelief. A dog, her natural enemy, was in the water. At first, instinct told her to roar, to drive him away. But her heart wouldn't let her. Something about the way he moved, desperate, fearless, determined, made her pause. She roared again, pacing along the bank, her golden eyes never leaving the cub. Canelo swam harder. Every stroke burned. The distance that looked short from shore now felt endless. The cub's cries were fading, his small head dipping beneath the surface again and again. When Canelo finally reached him, Eatsel was barely conscious, his little body limp, eyes glassy, breath weak. Canelo grabbed him gently by the scruff, holding his head above the surface. The weight almost pulled him down, but he refused to let go. The current dragged them both downstream, toward the deadly canyon. But Canelo had learned the rhythm of this river. He remembered a calm bend between the rocks, a shallow pool that might save them. With his last strength, he turned diagonally against the current, letting the flow push them toward that spot. The impact was brutal. A submerged boulder tore across his shoulder, but the force of the current threw them sideways into stiller water. Gasping, trembling, Canelo swam toward the gravel bank and collapsed, dragging the cub onto solid ground. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Only the river's endless rumble filled the silence. Canelo pressed his paw against the cub's chest. Once, twice, again. Nothing. He began licking the cub's face, nudging, pushing, pleading. Sitlali's roars echoed across the canyon, anguish and hope mixing in the desert air. Then, suddenly, a cough. A gasp that Eatsel's eyes fluttered open, his body twitching as he spat out river water. Canelo froze, staring, then let out a low whine of relief. From the opposite shore, Sitlali let out a roar so powerful it shook the ground. It was not rage. It was joy. Her cub was alive. And there, in the dying light of day, the impossible had happened. A mother and a stray dog, enemies by nature, were bound together by something greater than instinct, compassion. For a few long seconds after that roar, the desert stood still. The furious song of the river softened, the wind calmed, and the Sonoran air grew heavy with the scent of wet earth and fear fading into relief. Canelo lay half-collapsed on the gravel, his chest heaving, blood seeping from shallow cuts along his legs. Beside him, the tiny puma cub he had pulled from the water trembled weakly, eyes blinking open to the golden haze of dusk. The world had nearly taken him, and yet, somehow, he was alive. Across the riverbank, Sitlali had not moved. Her massive body trembled, muscles tense, breath ragged. She had roared until her voice broke, powerless against the river that had stolen her child. And now, she stared in stunned disbelief. Before her eyes, an impossible sight unfolded. A dog, one she would have hunted without hesitation, had just done what even she could not. He had brought her baby back from death, the instincts that ruled her life. The sharp, silent logic of survival began to crumble. What she saw wasn't prey or rival. It was an act of mercy so pure it confused every fiber of her being. For the first time in her life, Sitlali hesitated, torn between the predator she was born to be and the mother who could feel gratitude as raw as hunger. Slowly, cautiously, she began to move. Her paws sank into the soft mud at the river's edge, each step echoing through the canyon. Canelo lifted his head, his ears flicking, his breath coming in short, shallow bursts. He was too weak to run, too drained to defend himself. He simply watched as the golden figure approached, every movement radiating power, grace, and uncertainty. Sitlali stopped at the narrowest bend in the river, where the water calmed into a mirror. The setting sun painted her fur with fire as she crossed, not with aggression, but with the heavy steps of one walking towards something unknown. When she reached the other side, Canelo did not flinch. He simply lowered his gaze, his body still and submissive, as though he already understood her decision, whatever it might be. The cub stirred between them, letting out a faint, broken mewl that carried across the silence. That sound pierced Sitlali's heart like a thorn. The mother in her surged forward. She brushed past Canelo, lowering her massive head over her cub. Her nose pressed against his wet fur, her breath shuddering as she felt the warmth of life beneath it. Itzel coughed again, weak but alive. Sitlali licked his tiny face, whimpering softly, a sound no one had ever heard from her before. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't command. It was relief, naked and trembling. Then, something changed. She turned back to the dog, her golden eyes locked on his brown ones, searching, questioning. The river murmured between them, carrying the sound of water, heartbeats, and something ancient, understanding. Sitlali stepped forward. Canelo froze. The giant cat lowered her head, sniffed the air around him, and after a long pause, touched her muzzle gently to his forehead at a gesture of thanks, of peace, a moment that defied every law of the wild. For the first time in perhaps forever, the desert saw predator and scavenger not as enemies, but as reflections of the same truth, that love, when it rises, belongs to no single species. The night fell slowly, spilling silver light across the canyon. The river shimmered under the full moon as Sitlali curled around her cub, eyes half closed, body shielding him from the chill. Canelo lay nearby, too exhausted to move, his gaze fixed on the stars. Between them, a fragile truce formed, born not of language, but of shared struggle. In the darkness, coyotes called, owls stirred, but none dared approach. The air itself seemed to honor what had happened there. The wind carried only stillness, and the faint, rhythmic breaths of three creatures who had rewritten nature's rules in a single night. By dawn, the world was gold again. The first rays of sunlight spilled over the dunes, touching Sitlali's fur, painting her and her cub in firelight. She rose, stretching slowly, her cub pressed close against her legs. She looked once more at Canelo, who still lay by the river, his wounds dry, his eyes calm. For a moment, they regarded each other. No fear, no hatred, only respect. Then Sitlali gave a low growl, not a threat, but something like farewell. She turned toward the horizon. The cub followed, glancing back once at the reddish dog who had carried him from the jaws of death. Then, like ghosts of gold and shadow, they vanished into the tall desert grass. Canelo remained where he was for a long time, watching the trail of their footprints disappear into the light. For the first time since his abandonment, the silence did not feel empty. It felt whole. Weeks passed. Rangers exploring the region began noticing strange patterns in the sand. Enormous paw prints of a puma, always accompanied by the smaller tracks of a dog. It became a mystery that no one could explain. Some called it coincidence. Others whispered it was loyalty made visible. One evening, a ranger reported seeing something extraordinary. A puma mother and her growing cub drinking at one side of a pool. While across the same water, a lone reddish dog waited quietly, tail still, head bowed, as though paying his respects. The three of them remained that way until the last light faded, then disappeared back into the desert. Months later, those tracks vanished forever. But the story did not. It spread among locals and travelers alike. The tale of Canelo, the dog who saved a puma cub and changed the heart of a mother. Because in the endless struggle of the wild, where instinct rules and mercy is rare, one small act of courage can awaken something greater. The memory that all life, at its core, is bound by love, and somewhere beneath the blazing Sonoran sun, the wind still carries their names.